Hi everyone, welcome to our new section called Behind the Scenes. In today's installment, we're going to dissect our weekly vision number 1 from our Instagram account. If you haven't subscribed yet to our Instagram, you can do so by following the link in the description. So, weekly number 1 was based off the Residence Rabbit by Boon Design. And as you can see, there are a couple of interesting stuff that you can use in your next rendering. We're going to talk a little bit about the modeling and mainly about the lighting and a little bit about the framing, basically. So if we switch to the 3D modeling, you can see that in terms of framing, it's pretty simple. We have the higher third and left third that is occupied by the vegetation, as well as the lower third. And the rest of the image is basically the project in the frontal view and in sort of a mainly white and really simple material. Basically, the most important parts are this stair that I've added that is not in the project, and all the little tiny details that were added. And the main thing is actually regarding the reflection of the glazing and what's happening basically behind us. So in terms of modeling, there's nothing really complicated in there. There was a little bit of chamfering as usual, floor generator for some simple stuff. Most of the vegetation was ready-made, although some of it was done with GrowFX. The scattering is done with a simple simple forest pack just for the grass, because everything had to be carefully placed for the hero trees and hero shrubs, basically. So these are not like, they're only instances, and so it would be a little bit too hard to do them with forest pack. Here is a little garden that is done as well with forest pack. In the background here, there's a window, so we had to add a couple of stuff in the background so that it doesn't really stop awkwardly at the horizon level, which would be a little bit weird. So there's hedge and a couple of trees as well. In terms of modeling, again, the modeling of the windows were pretty straightforward. But as you can see, there's a little bit of detailing that is involved. Also, the stair here was pretty, well, could have been done a little bit better than that, but it still relies on the ready-made stair component of 3ds Max with a little bit of tweaking, but it's just quite pretty simple. In terms of texturing, there's the metal stairs, so that's basically that guy here behind. There's a little bit of so the main part is a simple metal with different dirt maps in the reflection and the bump, so that there's irregularities. And there's also a little bit of rust that is added in the dirt, like in the occluded area, using the V-Ray dirt map in the blending slot here. Same goes with the here, because you can see in the image that these guys are perforated. So here we use only an opacity map that is pretty simple, and the same material with a different dirt maps to get a slightly different result. But it's, as you can see, pretty simple. Could have been like done a better job in some details, because it's still pretty rough, but from that distance it's sort of okay. I think the main wall rendering here was pretty simple. There's an edge text so that you get some chamfered edges, because didn't model it this time, and there's a tiny change in the reflection glossiness so that you have irregularities as well in some sort of interesting detail. And I think there's something else. The diffuse is like fairly white and simple, so same goes with the reflection map. It's a really simple material. In terms of lighting, it's a little bit more fun, because basically what I wanted to do is to get this interesting light going from the inside to the upper part here, as well as some different lighting ambience or atmospheres here. And there was also the light streaks here. So it's pretty simple in terms of how you manage to do it. So there's basically our IES directional light here. These guys are just like light material. Here we have a couple of softboxes. There's the linear here that is giving us that guys and that guy. And here basically we have one huge invisible plane that gives us this effect here that we were looking for. And there's also another one behind that here that is adding some light on the left side of the image. And even though it is behind the tree, it is important to have that you can sort of see what's happening by looking at it. In terms of small details, there's also all the spotlight here and how they were recessed in the project. A couple of stuff in the inside of the building with the lobby or entrance here, as you can see, with the hangers and clothing. And I think that's pretty much it. The lighting was also done with overcast HDRI and the dome light, but in terms of lighting, you can see it's pretty simple. There's a couple of soft boxes and IES light, nothing really fancy. The final image also has a slight depth of field effect, if I'm sure, yeah. So that's why the aperture is a little bit, it's actually quite small, so it's a really tiny DOF, so it's quite subtle, but it still brings quite a bit of an interesting aspect to the image. I think that's pretty much it for the 3D modeling. We can switch to the post-processing. So the raw rendering looks like that, so it's not that bad, but it always lacks a little bit of contrast and some tweaks. There wasn't any particular mistakes in terms of rendering, because sometimes there are some weird stuff that happens, and I tend to actually tweak them in the post-processing part rather than try to understand where they come from, is because sometimes it really goes much quicker. So time is of the essence. And first things first, there's the extra. So here is our occlusion map, that is the extra text in V-Ray for the render elements. So it's set to multiply, change a little the contrast, and then lower the opacity, and it's set to multiply. That guy is set to multiply, sorry. Up. So it sort of brings interesting ambient occlusion in the image. I think there wasn't much. There was a tiny bit of contrast, because as you can see in black and white, everything is a little bit the same. Like it lacks a tiny bit of contrast, especially for not nighttime rendering, but it's still like sort of the end of the afternoon, something like that. There's a little bit of dodge on the left side here, and a little bit of burn in some areas to sort of enhance the occlusion. I think there's also, yeah, the base rendering was added a tiny bit of glare, but still I think I've added a bit in post-production because I tend to do it a lot. So if we look at these guys. So always the same thing. It's a simple image of a spotlight set to screen so that you have this interesting small effect here. So pretty simple. Here's a curve adjustment that brings a little bit more of a emphasis on the white of the wall, which, as you can see, is quite interesting. And then it was more of a playing around with the colors, because I wasn't really happy with how it looks like that. So here is the little bit tweaked with the clarity and basically the usual camera raw presets with a little bit of clarity and vibrance to change it a little. And then it's the Nick collection with a contrast color range here that pumps up the lighting inside. Then classical soft focus just for some bloom effects a little bit in some areas. Here's another one that just changed it a little bit because I wanted the vegetation to be slightly blue here. So I could have done it with a hue saturation, but well. Same goes with the cross processing here, that gives a slightly blue tint to the white here, so that we have something more realistic regarding the overall lighting of the image. And here is just a dodge layer that I've added afterwards, just to add a little bit more emphasis on the stair. And that guy I didn't use in the end. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it in terms of post-processing here. Since I had a more specific precedent to start from, it was easier to have like a better rendering, and there wasn't much involved in terms of post-processing. So I guess that's it. Hopefully you've learned some interesting tips and ideas for your next rendering, and I'll see you in the next behind the scenes installment. Bye guys.
Schneider.